200 wedding invitations went out with my address on them, Willow Creek Farm, 1184 Carter Road, and the only reason I found out was because the florist called to ask if the arch would look better under my willow or by my chicken coop. That was the moment I realized I'd been promoted from mom to free venue with on-site housekeeper. My name is Evelyn Carter. 70 years old, knuckles carved by 40 years of work that smelled like bleach and other people's lemon polish. I cleaned marble foyers that didn't know my name, ironed silk shirts for men who only noticed me when a button popped, and stacked every spare dollar into a coffee tin labeled Someday. Someday became 80 acres tucked outside Atlanta, Georgia, white farmhouse, emerald pasture, peach trees stubborn enough to bloom after hail. The deed says Evelyn M. Carter, sole owner. I keep it framed in the hallway like a family portrait. So when Marcus, my only son, and his fiancée Vanessa decided the words, family property, meant, take what you want and don't ask, something old and heavy inside me finally stood up. I was watering tomatoes when the calls started. Caterer, DJ, photographer, everybody chirping the same cheerful lie, we're excited to make your wedding perfect. Ms. Carter, I nearly overwatered the basil with my own heartbeat. I called Marcus. He answered with that busy boy voice that makes mothers apologize for breathing. Ma, I was gonna mention it. We've got it covered, won't cost you a thing. Oh, baby, I said, sweet as iced tea on a Sunday. That's the problem, it's already cost me 40 years. After I hung up, I dialed Richard Allen at Allen Premier Events. The kind of planner who says, bespoke, like it's a verb. Can you do a corporate on Saturday? Privacy, punctuality, premium rate. Silence, then money's favorite word, absolutely. I polished floors until they winked at me. I clipped roses that had the nerve to bloom crooked. I set out lemonade for myself in a cut glass pitcher because if I'm hosting power, I'll be hydrated. When Richard toured the grounds, his eyebrows did a slow motion standing ovation. Ms. Carter, people would pay handsomely for this. Then let's let them, I said, and signed the contract with a hand that did not shake. Friday morning, Vanessa called, voice pitched somewhere between soprano and fire alarm. The florist can't get in. They say there's another event. There is, I said, stirring my grits. A corporate one. You can't do this. Can't? I tasted the word like a bad grape and spit it out. Child, my deed can. An hour later, tires spit gravel up my drive. Marcus stormed in wearing a tux fitting like a confession and said, fix it. Vanessa stood behind him in a robe and rollers, glaring like I'd stolen her veil. Fix what? I asked. My backbone? Baby, that's finally straight. They explained about 200 guests, flights, hotel blocks, a unity candle with their initials burned into it like a cattle brand. I listened. I even nodded. Then I told them about respect, how it's paid before the deposit. Not after the disaster. Vanessa offered money. Marcus offered promises. I set my lemonade down and offered the truth. This land is not a suggestion. By noon Saturday, Allen Premier had my lawn turned into a boardroom with birdsong. White tents like pressed shirts. Round tables that didn't wobble. Executives in suits treating me like a CEO because, newsflash, I am Chief Evelyn owner. At 2:30, the wedding convoy arrived anyway, ribbons on cars. Panic on faces. Vanessa stepped out in ivory. Beautiful as a hymn and twice as loud. Marcus ran to the porch. Ma, please. His voice had the little boy in it again. The one who used to bring me dandelions like they were gold. I rocked once in my chair. The way queens rock when the court forgets who wears the crown. Son, I said, there's still a path to your altar. But it now runs through my terms. Before the vows, there would be conditions, and the first would make 200 guests gasp. The priest blinked twice, and my son learned the price of borrowing a mother's land without asking. Marcus froze halfway up the porch steps, tuxedo tail flapping like a flag in the wind. Vanessa clutched her bouquet so hard I thought the roses might file for workers' comp. What conditions? He asked. His voice tight, like a man who suddenly realized the mortgage isn't in his name. I stood, smoothed my burgundy dress, one I hadn't worn since Jimmy Carter was president, and let the screen door clap shut behind me. First, any event on my land requires my consent. 1 month in advance. From now until I'm buried under that willow tree out back. I'm the one who says yes or no. Vanessa blinked, her mascara already wobbling. But this is our wedding day, she wailed. And this is my farm. Sweetheart, I said, my tone polite as church pie but sharp as a box cutter. Second, you'll pay rent for every gathering here, $1 a month. Plus maintenance. Broken fence? Your bill. Fallen tree? Your bill. I'm not running a free Airbnb for relatives who only know my phone number when they need barbecue. Marcus looked like he'd swallowed a spoonful of gravel. Ma, that's insane. We're family. That word's been your coupon code for years. I said, but coupons expire. The porch creaked as Reverend Brooks, kindly as a butter biscuit but with eyes sharp as crow feathers, stepped closer. Now, Sister Evelyn, perhaps we could. I cut him off gently. Reverend, I've spent 5 years cleaning up after their family gatherings. Today, I'm not the maid. Today, I'm the matriarch. Vanessa's voice cracked. Fine, we'll pay. Just, please, don't ruin this day. Oh, I'm not done. I held up a third finger. Slow as a courtroom verdict. During tonight's toast, I'll tell every guest exactly how this wedding was planned, without my consent. Using my address. Treating me like a doormat with acreage. The truth will be served before dessert. The color drained from Vanessa's face faster than champagne in the July sun. You wouldn't, she whispered. Oh, I would, because respect tastes better when it's swallowed in public. The silence that followed was heavy enough to bend the porch railings. Even the cicadas outside shut up, probably taking notes. Marcus rubbed his forehead like he could erase my words. Ma, 200 people are out there. If you tell them that, it'll humiliate us. I tilted my chin. And haven't you humiliated me? For 5 years? The only difference is yours will last 5 minutes. And mine has lasted half a decade. Reverend Brooks shifted his weight. Lips pursed. He didn't argue. He didn't need to. Everyone knew the ledger was balanced in my favor. Marcus glanced at Vanessa. Vanessa glanced at Marcus. And in that silent exchange I saw it. Whether they would swallow pride or swallow disaster. The next words out of their mouths would decide if there'd be a wedding, or a war. Marcus's jaw flexed like he was grinding rocks into flour. Vanessa dabbed at her cheeks with the back of her lace glove. Her bouquet hanging limp as a drowned bird. The guests outside shifted like restless cattle, murmuring, their confusion bubbling louder with every car that pulled up. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice low, like a man bargaining with the executioner. All right, Ma, we'll do it. We'll pay the rent. We'll fix the fences. We'll ask permission from now on. His eyes flicked toward the yard. Just don't take this wedding away from us. Vanessa let out a shaky sob, gripping his arm. Yes, yes, we'll do whatever you say. Just let us get married here. Please. I rocked back on my heels, letting the weight of their desperation sink in. For the first time in years, they weren't barking orders, they were begging. The shift in power was so sweet. I could have bottled it like peach jam and sold it at the farmer's market. Good, I said, because I'm not here to ruin your wedding. I'm here to make sure you remember whose land you're standing on when you say those vows. Vanessa sniffled. So, you'll allow it? I'll allow it, I said, drawing out the words like honey dripping off a spoon. But only after Mr. Allen's executives finish their meeting. Until then, your wedding is on hold. That means an evening ceremony. Candlelit, under the willow tree. Romantic, don't you think? The hope that flickered in Vanessa's eyes was almost comical. Like watching someone spot a lifeboat after the ship already sank. Yes, she breathed. Yes, that could work. Marcus swallowed hard, his pride going down like vinegar. And the toast? I didn't blink. Non-negotiable. The silence stretched. Then, with a resigned sigh, Marcus nodded. Fine, we'll accept your conditions, all of them. Just then, a ripple of movement at the edge of the yard caught my attention. Guests in suits and dresses had clustered together, whispering like bees disturbed from their hive. One of them, an older woman in a wide-brimmed hat, finally marched up to the porch. Excuse me, ma'am, she said crisply, eyeing me up and down. I'm here for Marcus and Vanessa's wedding. Is there a reason the property is occupied by businessmen? I folded my arms across my chest and smiled. Yes, there is a reason, and if you stick around until tonight, you'll hear the whole story straight from me. Her eyes widened, but before she could respond, the sound of clinking champagne glasses floated from the backyard where the corporate team was already toasting. The contrast was too rich, one side of the property filled with polished executives talking profits, the other boiling with gossiping wedding guests about to witness the most unconventional nuptials in town history. And as the whispers spread through the crowd, I realized tonight's wedding wasn't just going to be a union of two young fools in love, it was going to be my coronation as the woman who finally demanded respect. The woman in the hat turned back to the crowd, whispering fast as wildfire. Within minutes, I could see heads swiveling toward the porch, eyes narrowing at me like I was the villain in their soap opera. Good, let them stew. Every matriarch needs an audience. Inside the house, Vanessa sank onto my velvet settee like she owned it. How are we supposed to tell our families? They'll hate us if they know. I tilted my head. Child, respect isn't a popularity contest. If your family's love depends on keeping secrets, it's not love, it's blackmail wrapped in hugs. Marcus raked a hand through his hair, ruining the last trace of that magazine groom look. Ma, I'm begging you, just tone it down tonight. Spare us the humiliation. Oh, Marcus, I said sweetly, you can't spell humiliation without him. Even Reverend Brooks chuckled under his breath before catching himself. By 3 o'clock, the tension was so thick you could spread it on toast. Guests fanned themselves with programs that now looked like legal subpoenas. Cousins paced, aunties clucked. One man from Vanessa's side muttered, "Should have booked the Marriott ballroom." Meanwhile, out back, Richard Allen's corporate crew moved with military precision, executives in suits clinking glasses, servers circulating shrimp skewers. It was a symphony of competence. And I loved every note. Richard strolled by me with a clipboard. "Mrs. Carter, everything's ahead of schedule. If we wrap by 4:30, the grounds will be spotless for your evening program." Good, I said, because tonight isn't just a wedding. It's a masterclass. When the corporate CEO came over to shake my hand, he said, "Mrs. Carter, your property is magnificent. If you ever want steady income, call me. We'd rent this place monthly." I nearly laughed out loud. 40 years scrubbing other people's marble. And here I was being courted like a luxury resort. The irony tasted better than champagne. Back at the front, Vanessa peeked through the curtains, watching her relatives stir like hornets. "They're getting restless," she whispered. "They're asking questions we can't answer." "Then let them," I said, leaning back in my rocking chair. "Tonight, they'll get all the answers they deserve. Straight, no chaser." Marcus groaned. "Ma, you're enjoying this way too much." "Baby," I said, smiling at the horizon, "you're just now meeting the part of me that's been quiet too long. Tonight, she gets a microphone." And as the sun slid lower, painting the sky with gold, I knew one thing for certain when I stood up to give my toast. It wouldn't just rewrite this wedding, it would rewrite my entire place in this family forever. By 4 o'clock, the farm was buzzing like a hornet's nest. The corporate event was winding down. Executives clapping each other on the back, swapping business cards, and piling into polished SUVs. Meanwhile, the wedding guests were stuck in limbo, pacing around my driveway like extras in a courtroom drama waiting for the verdict. Vanessa's bridesmaids huddled in the corner of my porch, whispering furiously. One finally burst out, "She's doing this to ruin your day." I sipped my sweet tea and smiled at them. On the contrary, ladies, I'm doing this to save their marriage before it starts. No vows should be spoken on stolen ground. That shut them up faster than a Sunday sermon. Richard Allen appeared at my side with his clipboard and a grin. "Mrs. Carter, the grounds are cleared. My crew will leave the lighting and seating as is for the wedding. If that's acceptable." "More than acceptable," I said. "It's poetic. A business meeting by day, a wedding by night. That's what I call dual-purpose profit." He chuckled. "You're a natural. Ever thought of running your farm as a venue permanently?" "Richard," I said, tapping the deed framed on my wall. This farm is already permanent. The venue part? That's just the icing. By 5 o'clock, the guests were restless, fanning themselves with programs that now looked like tiny white flags of surrender. The air was sticky with heat, perfume, and frustration. I stood from my chair, adjusted my pearl earrings, and stepped onto the porch like a queen ready to address her court. Family, friends, and future in-laws, I began, my voice carrying across the yard. I know you're confused, I know you're hot, but in 1 hour, this farm will host the wedding you came to see. And before the night is over, you'll also hear the truth of how it almost didn't happen. Because tonight isn't just about vows, it's about respect. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I caught Marcus burying his face in his hands, and Vanessa clutching her bouquet so hard the stems snapped. And as murmurs swelled into a wave of speculation, I realized something delicious. The wedding had stopped being their story. It was now unmistakably mine. The murmurs spread like wildfire. Every cousin, auntie, and out-of-town guest leaning in to catch the gossip before it reached them too late. A man in suspenders hissed, "What does she mean by respect?" while another whispered, "Sounds like drama's about to be served with the cake." Vanessa's mother, pearls clattering at her throat, stormed up the porch steps. "Mrs. Carter," she said, her voice tight as piano wire, "you can't possibly intend to embarrass Marcus and Vanessa in front of 200 people. They're young. They made a mistake. Don't you think this is excessive?" I tilted my head, letting her see every silver strand in my hair gleam under the fading sun. "Ma'am, what's excessive is planning a wedding on land you don't own, with money you didn't earn, and acting like the person who does own it should be grateful." Her lips pressed so tight I thought she'd swallow her pearls whole. She backed down the steps without another word, retreating into the crowd of gossiping relatives. Marcus finally stood, shoulders slumped, voice low. "Ma, I swear, we'll make it right, just don't make a scene." "Baby," I said, stepping close enough to tap his cheek with my finger. "The scene was made the moment your invitations hit 200 mailboxes with my address on them." Reverend Brooks cleared his throat. That pastor's cough that usually hushes a congregation. "Perhaps we should focus on the love at hand," he suggested. "Love," I echoed, my voice steady. "Love without respect is a lease with no signature. Reverend, and tonight, I'm collecting rent." The sun dipped lower, casting the willow tree in molten gold. The corporate crew wheeled away their last carts, leaving behind glowing lanterns and spotless tables. The place looked like a fairy tale waiting for its climax. Guests shifted toward the makeshift altar, relief breaking through the tension like a breeze. But they didn't know what was coming. Not yet. I smoothed the front of my burgundy dress, adjusted my pearls, and whispered to myself, "Time to give this farm the speech it's been waiting for." And as the first notes of the wedding march began, I knew one thing: before the night was over, every guest would remember this wedding, not for the vows, not for the dress, but for the matriarch who finally took back her crown. The first chords of the wedding march floated through the evening air, thin and wobbly from a Bluetooth speaker that had clearly seen better days. Vanessa adjusted her veil with trembling hands, forcing a smile so brittle it could have cracked like sugar glass. Marcus stood stiff by the altar, sweat darkening his collar despite the cooling dusk. 200 guests shuffled into mismatched seats, whispers slithering louder than the music itself. I stayed back on the porch, my rocking chair creaking like a judge's gavel. Every eye might have been on the bride, but I knew the real anticipation hung on me. Vanessa's bridesmaids scurried in pastel heels, hissing about flower petals and last-minute disasters. One muttered, "This is cursed," while another whispered, "Wait until Aunt Lila hears." I smirked. Let Aunt Lila hear. Let the whole town hear. Tonight, gossip was my gospel. Reverend Brooks cleared his throat at the altar, his calm presence like molasses poured over chaos. "Dearly beloved," he began, his voice rolling smooth and steady. "We are gathered here today." Gathered, I muttered under my breath. On land they didn't ask to borrow. Vanessa shot me a glance sharp enough to slice the veil right off her head. Marcus followed her gaze, jaw tight, eyes pleading, silently begging me not to derail the moment. I folded my hands in my lap like a queen pretending to behave. But my smile said otherwise. Wait for the toast, son. The vows began. Vanessa's voice cracked as she recited her lines. Her, I do, trembling like a leaf. Marcus's, I do, came out stronger. Though not from love, more from sheer desperation to get through the minefield. When Reverend Brooks finally said, "You may kiss the bride," the guests erupted into applause like they'd been holding their breath for hours. But as champagne glasses clinked and the first cheer rose, Richard Allen, ever the showman, stepped forward with a wireless microphone. He handed it to me with a grin that said he knew exactly what was about to happen. "Mrs. Carter," he announced to the crowd, "as the gracious hostess of Willow Creek Farm, would you like to offer the first toast?" The yard went silent. 200 heads turned in unison. Vanessa froze, glass in hand. Marcus actually whispered, "God help us." I rose from my chair, adjusted my burgundy dress, and walked forward with the microphone. The gravel crunched beneath my heels like a drumroll. And as I reached the center, 200 guests leaned in, waiting, not for romance, not for blessings, but for the storm I was about to unleash. I stood beneath the lanterns, their golden glow pooling across my shoulders like I'd been crowned by the night itself. The crowd hushed, glasses suspended midair, even the crickets quieted as though they too wanted a front row seat. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady, rolling across the yard like gospel from a pulpit. "I'm Evelyn Carter, Marcus's mother, Vanessa's mother-in-law, and the sole owner of Willow Creek Farm." A polite ripple of applause spread, but I held up a hand. "Now, I need to tell y'all something, and it may not sound like the fairy tale toast you expected." Vanessa's smile cracked like porcelain. Marcus shifted his weight, eyes darting toward the ground. "You see," I continued, "I worked 40 years scrubbing other people's kitchens, polishing floors they never thanked me for, and pinching every penny until I could buy this farm. Every fence post, every peach tree, every porch plank was paid for with my sweat, my tears, and more late nights than I care to remember. And when I finally signed the deed, I swore no one would ever make me feel small on my own land again." A few nods flickered through the crowd. Cousins exchanged looks. Even Reverend Brooks folded his hands and listened. "Well," I said, drawing in a long breath, "this week I found out that 200 wedding invitations went out, with my farm's address, without anyone asking me if it was okay." The crowd gasped as if someone had dropped a tray of crystal. Murmurs rippled, eyes swiveling toward Marcus and Vanessa, who looked like mannequins caught in headlights. "Yes," I said, nodding slowly, "I learned about the wedding the same way you did, by invitation. And for a moment, I thought maybe I was just the hired help again. But then I remembered, this is my farm. Not theirs, not borrowed, not assumed, mine." The silence was thick enough to butter. A few guests actually applauded softly, unsure if they were allowed. I lifted my glass high. "So tonight, we're not just celebrating love. We're celebrating respect. Respect for family, respect for boundaries, and most of all, respect for mothers who will no longer be treated like housekeepers in their own homes." The applause thundered this time, wild, spontaneous, rolling across the yard like a summer storm. And as I looked at my son's face, stunned, humbled, maybe even proud, I realized this toast wasn't the end of the lesson. It was only the beginning of how everything in this family was about to change. The applause rolled on, some polite, some genuine, but all of it loud enough to drown out Vanessa's shaky breathing. She tried to smile, clutching Marcus's arm as if applause alone might glue their dignity back together. I lowered my glass and leaned into the mic. "Now don't mistake me, tonight is still about Marcus and Vanessa. They stand here promising forever, and that is worth celebrating. But let this wedding also stand as a reminder. Forever means nothing without respect." The crowd murmured again, this time softer, like a church agreeing with the sermon. Even the teenagers in the back, usually glued to their phones, were staring at me like I'd just announced free Wi-Fi. I handed the mic back to Richard Allen, who looked like he'd just witnessed the most profitable drama of his career. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said smoothly, "let's raise a glass to love, respect, and new beginnings." 200 glasses clinked. Marcus lifted his with trembling fingers. His eyes wet. "To my mother," he said hoarsely. It wasn't in the script, but it was the most honest thing he'd said all night. For a moment, I felt the old ache, the mother's instinct to forgive everything. To smooth the edges, to rescue him from himself. But then I remembered the phone call. "Don't worry, Ma, it won't cost you a thing." And I knew I couldn't soften the lesson now. The reception kicked off under lantern light. Guests lined up for food. Kids chased each other across the grass. And the band played a shaky rendition of "At Last." But everywhere I went, people stopped me, shaking my hand, praising my courage, whispering their own stories. "My son treats me the same way," one aunt confessed, tears shining in her eyes. "I wish I'd had your strength," another whispered. "Mrs. Carter," a younger woman said, "you just taught me how to stand up to my brothers." It was like I'd accidentally started a movement right there in my backyard. At the head table, Marcus and Vanessa sat stiff, smiling mechanically for photos while whispers swirled around them. I didn't gloat much. I simply savored my fried chicken and cornbread while remembering how it felt to finally be queen of my own castle. But just as I set down my fork, Marcus rose from his chair, tapped his glass, and asked for the microphone, his voice carrying a tremor that told me he was about to gamble everything in front of 200 witnesses. Marcus's fork clattered against his glass, the sound sharp enough to slice through the chatter. Conversations died mid-sentence. Guests froze with half-eaten chicken legs and champagne flutes paused mid-air. Even the fiddler in the band stopped bowing mid-note. "Everyone," Marcus said, his voice shaking like a boy giving a book report he hadn't read. I need to say something." Vanessa's hand shot out, gripping his wrist. "Marcus, no," she hissed, smile still plastered for the cameras. But he gently pulled free. "I need to say this," he repeated, louder now. His gaze swept over the guests, then landed on me. His throat bobbed, his jaw worked, and then the words tumbled out. "I disrespected my mother." A collective gasp rippled across the tables like a gust of wind. Marcus's eyes brimmed with tears, and his tuxedo looked suddenly too big for him. "For years," he said, voice breaking, "I treated her home like it was mine. I took her sacrifices for granted. I planned this wedding without asking her permission. Because deep down, I thought I didn't need it. But tonight, standing here, I realize I was wrong. I needed it more than anything. Because without her, without the respect she deserves, none of this means anything." The crowd was silent, hanging on every syllable. Even Vanessa's mother dabbed at her eyes, though I suspected it was partly for the show. "I want everyone here to know," Marcus continued, turning toward me, "that this farm is hers. Always hers. And from now on, when we step on this land, we'll step with respect. Mom?" His voice cracked, and for the first time in years, he looked like my little boy again. "I'm sorry." The words dropped into the night like stones into water, rippling out through every guest, every cousin, every bridesmaid clutching a tissue. I held his gaze, my throat tight. Part of me wanted to run up and hug him, to say all was forgiven. But another part, the part that had been invisible for decades, knew better. I rose slowly, letting the chair scrape against the porch. "Apology accepted," I said, voice firm. "But remember, respect isn't proven in words spoken at a microphone. It's proven in choices you make when no one's watching." The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was thunderous, cathartic, the kind that lifts a roof. And as I sat back down, watching Marcus wipe his eyes and Vanessa tremble beside him, I knew this night was far from over, because words were easy. But the test of actions was coming sooner than they thought. The applause faded into murmurs, little ripples of gossip spreading across the tables. Vanessa forced a smile so wide it looked painful, whispering something sharp into Marcus's ear. He nodded, jaw tight, eyes still shiny from tears. Guests returned to their food, though the air was different now, charged. Like everyone knew they'd just witnessed history on my front lawn. Some cousins clapped me on the back as they passed. One old neighbor leaned in and whispered, "Took you long enough, Evelyn." I nearly laughed into my sweet tea. But I didn't get long to savor it. Because after the cake was cut, 3 tiers of buttercream taller than my patience. Vanessa's uncle strutted up to me, wine glass sloshing in his hand. "So," he said, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear, "you're the woman who almost cancelled the wedding." I raised my brows. "Almost? Darling, I did cancel it. They just had to reschedule around my terms." A nervous chuckle rippled through the crowd. The uncle blinked, clearly not expecting me to own it. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Some of us think you embarrassed the kids tonight. Family matters should stay in the family." I set down my glass and met his eyes. "And some of us think children shouldn't treat their mother like a rental hall. If my truth embarrasses them, maybe it's because they needed a mirror." He backed away like I'd slapped him without raising a hand. That was the thing about boundaries, they sting most when you've never seen them before. Meanwhile, the band struck up a livelier tune. Guests swayed under the willow lights. Kids chased fireflies, and laughter slowly replaced the tension. For the first time all day, the wedding started to feel like a celebration instead of a standoff. But I stayed watchful. I knew pride has a way of striking back after humility has been forced. And sure enough, I caught Vanessa whispering furiously to her maid of honor, eyes darting toward me with the kind of glare you save for lifelong enemies. I didn't know what she was plotting, but one thing was certain, Vanessa wasn't done fighting. And neither was I. Vanessa's glare cut across the lantern glow like a blade. She leaned into her maid of honor's ear, whispering fast, her jeweled earrings swinging with every hissed word. I didn't need to hear to know the rhythm of spite. Women like me have survived on decoding whispers our whole lives. Her maid of honor's eyes widened, then flicked toward me. Whatever they were cooking up, I was the main ingredient. I straightened my pearls and sipped my coffee, letting the bitterness settle on my tongue. If Vanessa wanted round 2, I'd give her a whole championship bout. Marcus, bless him, tried to salvage the night. He pulled Vanessa onto the dance floor. His tux rumpled, her train dragging dirt. The band struck up Unchained Melody, and for a brief moment, under the willow tree and fairy lights, they almost looked like a happy couple. Almost. But Vanessa's smile never reached her eyes. She clung to Marcus like a lifeline, yet kept darting glances toward me as if I were the storm cloud over her first dance. Guests swayed, couples kissed, and the reception eased into a rhythm. But then, just as I set down my cup, Vanessa released Marcus's hand, marched straight across the dance floor, and stopped in front of me. "Mrs. Carter," she said, voice syrupy but sharp, "may I have the microphone?" The crowd hushed again, forks hovering, dancers freezing mid-step. Richard Allen glanced at me, waiting for my signal. I smiled, slow as honey dripping from the comb. "Of course, dear, let's hear what you have to say." Vanessa snatched the mic, her knuckles white against the silver handle. "Everyone," she began, her voice trembling but pitched loud enough to reach the back tables. "I know tonight hasn't gone as planned. I know some of you think Marcus and I disrespected his mother. But I need you to hear our side." Gasps fluttered through the crowd. Marcus's eyes went wide, his hand half raised as if to stop her. But Vanessa pressed on. And in that instant, I knew Vanessa was about to try and flip the script. To paint herself as the victim, and me as the villain. But she had no idea I'd been preparing for this battle my whole life. Vanessa's voice wobbled at first, but she steadied it like a singer finding her pitch. "For years," she declared, eyes sweeping across the guests, "Marcus and I have treated this farm like our second home. We brought friends. We celebrated milestones. We dreamed about starting our married life here. We thought it was family tradition. We thought it was love." A few sympathetic nods flickered in the crowd. Her maid of honor sniffled dramatically, as if on cue. But instead of joy, Vanessa continued, "Tonight became about conditions, rules, contracts." She threw a quick glance my way, her tone sharp now. "Marcus's mother turned our wedding into a lesson. And while I respect her sacrifices, I don't think anyone deserves to have the happiest day of their life overshadowed like this." The crowd murmured, a mix of pity and discomfort. Vanessa clutched the mic tighter, her veil trembling with her breath. "So if I seem upset, it's not because I don't love Marcus, or this family. It's because tonight I learned that love, apparently, Comes with strings attached. She handed the microphone back, tears streaking her cheeks, and collapsed into her chair. A silence hung over the crowd like a fog, thick, unsettled, waiting for the wind to clear it. I rose slowly, the wood of my chair groaning like a drumbeat. "Well," I said, my voice calm, carrying across the yard. That was moving, almost convincing. The guests tensed. Marcus buried his face in his hand. "Vanessa's right about one thing," I said, taking the mic. "I did turn tonight into a lesson. Because lessons are how we grow. And if two grown adults think it's love to send out 200 invitations without asking the landowner, then yes." This mother decided class was in session. Gasps again, sharper this time, but I didn't stop. Love without respect isn't love, it's entitlement. And entitlement has never built a home worth living in. The crowd erupted in applause, stronger, louder than before. Aunts stood, neighbors nodded, even a few of Vanessa's relatives clapped despite themselves. Vanessa's face blazed scarlet. Marcus reached for her hand, but she jerked away. And as the applause thundered, I realized something delicious. Vanessa wasn't just humiliated. She was cornered, and people show their truest selves when there's nowhere left to hide. Vanessa's painted smile cracked clean in half. She sat stiff in her chair, bouquet abandoned on the table, eyes darting between the clapping guests as though searching for a single ally in the crowd. But applause is a powerful tide, it doesn't stop to ask who it drowns. Marcus leaned close, whispering something desperate in her ear. She yanked her hand away, her face a storm cloud of fury and shame. For a bride in white lace, she suddenly looked more like a general who'd just lost the battle she thought she'd win. I set the mic back on its stand, folded my hands, and let the noise wash over me. Not triumph, not revenge, just the quiet certainty that comes when the truth finally stands taller than the lie. But I wasn't finished. "Oh no. Ladies and gentlemen," I said once the clapping dimmed. "Now that we've heard from both sides, let's finish what we came here for. Eat, dance, celebrate, and remember this night not as the wedding that almost didn't happen, but as the one where respect finally did." That broke the tension. Laughter bubbled, glasses clinked, the band struck up something lively. Children squealed as they chased fireflies under the willow tree. And for the first time, the evening felt less like a standoff and more like a party. Still, I kept my eyes on Vanessa. She laughed when spoken to, posed for photos, even danced once or twice. But her smile never touched her eyes. It was the look of a woman filing grievances in her mind like knives in a drawer. Meanwhile, Marcus softened. He fetched me a plate, pulled out my chair, even leaned down to kiss my cheek. "Thanks for not letting me ruin my life, Ma," he whispered. I squeezed his hand. "Baby, I didn't stop you. I just made sure you paid attention while you crashed." The poor boy laughed through his tears. The sound of a man finally realizing that sometimes Mama's tough love comes with an invoice. But while Marcus leaned into humility, Vanessa leaned into silence, and I knew silence in a daughter-in-law is never empty. It's a promise, one I'd have to be ready for. The music swelled, couples spun under the lantern light, and the evening breeze carried the smell of barbecue and buttercream. Guests finally relaxed, laughing and clinking glasses, relieved the drama had cooled. But I knew better. Storms don't end with thunder, they linger in the air, heavy and waiting. Vanessa's silence was that storm. She sat at the head table, veil crooked, lipstick smudged, staring at me like I was the devil who'd stolen her halo. Her bridesmaids clustered around her, whispering frantically, casting me quick glances like they were plotting a jailbreak. Marcus tried to keep things afloat, dancing with cousins, shaking hands with uncles, even twirling little nieces around until their giggles softened the night. But every time he glanced back at his bride, the joy slipped from his face. He saw it too, the frost that not even champagne could melt. I stayed where I belonged, at the porch, sipping coffee, the matriarch watching over her kingdom. Guests drifted up to me one by one, offering compliments, gratitude, even confessions. "My daughter treats me the same way," one woman said, gripping my hand tight. "You gave us all courage tonight." Another whispered, "Mrs. Carter, A young man chuckled. You're a legend. My mama's gonna hear this story by sunrise. Their words were balm to scars I hadn't even realized were still raw. But when the music slowed and couples paired off again, I caught sight of Vanessa slipping away from the dance floor, her maid of honor trailing behind her like a shadow. They disappeared toward the farmhouse kitchen. I set down my cup. Oh no, sweetheart, not in my house. I rose, my heels clicking against the porch boards like a gavel. With every step toward the kitchen, I felt the years of swallowing pride fall away. Tonight, there would be no whispers behind my back. Not anymore. Because if Vanessa thought she could scheme under my roof, she was about to learn the hardest rule of Willow Creek Farm: you don't plot against the queen in her own castle. The kitchen light spilled onto the hallway like a stage spotlight. I paused at the doorway, listening. Vanessa's voice cut sharp through the hum of cicadas outside. She humiliated me in front of everyone. She hissed. This was supposed to be my perfect day. And now all they'll remember is her speech. Her maid of honor murmured something soothing, but Vanessa slammed her palm on the counter hard enough to rattle the teacups. No, I won't live in Marcus's mother's shadow. If she thinks I'm going to bow and scrape every time we step foot on this farm, she's dead wrong. I stepped into the doorway, slow and deliberate, heels clicking against the tile. Funny, I said, folding my arms, because the way I remember it, bowing was exactly what you did earlier when you begged me to save this wedding. They both spun around, eyes wide, caught like kids with hands in the cookie jar. Vanessa straightened her shoulders, forcing a smile as brittle as sugar glass. Mrs. Carter, I was just upset. You understand, it's been a stressful day. Oh, I understand, I said, my voice calm but edged like a knife freshly sharpened. I understand that gratitude isn't in your vocabulary unless it's convenient. And I understand that if you think you can storm into my kitchen and rewrite the story, you've picked the wrong stage. Her maid of honor stammered. We didn't mean. I raised a hand. Save it. This farm has one queen. And you're looking at her. If you plan to be part of this family, Vanessa, you'll learn that respect isn't optional, it's rent. Paid daily. And if you can't afford it, you're welcome to build your empire elsewhere. Vanessa's face went pale, but her eyes still burned. So this is how it's going to be, she whispered. Yes, I said simply, turning toward the door, exactly how it should have been all along. And as I stepped back onto the porch, leaving Vanessa to stew in silence, I knew the real battle had only just begun, for respect isn't won in one night. It's enforced, day after day, until no one dares forget who holds the deed. The night pressed on, warm and buzzing, but I carried that kitchen exchange like a stone in my pocket, heavy, reminding me it wasn't over. Out on the porch, laughter bubbled again as the band struck a quick fiddle tune. Guests clapped, stomping their feet on the grass, trying to shake off the drama that had defined the day. I eased back into my rocking chair, watching Marcus whirl a giggling niece in his arms. For once, he looked lighter, as if admitting his mistake had peeled a weight from his shoulders. But Vanessa, she stayed planted at the table, smile pasted on, eyes sharp as a tack. Neighbors slipped by to pat my hand. You showed strength tonight, Evelyn, one said. Another added, took guts to speak the truth with a microphone in hand. Their words warmed me, but deep down, I knew strength isn't measured in speeches. It's measured in what happens after the applause dies. By 10 o'clock, sparklers glowed in guests' hands, sending trails of fire into the humid air. Children drew circles of light, shouting and laughing. The newlyweds lined up for their grand exit, Marcus grinning nervously, Vanessa stiff beside him. As the sparklers flickered, Marcus hugged me tight, whispering, "Thank you, Ma, I swear, I won't forget this." His arms trembled, sincerity pouring out of him like sweat. Then Vanessa leaned in, her smile sugary for the crowd. "We'll be in touch, Mom," she murmured, but the way she pressed the word told me it was less a promise and more a threat. I kissed her cheek anyway, leaving a print of lipstick like a signature on a contract she didn't want but had no choice to accept. The car pulled away, ribbons flapping in the night breeze. Guests waved, laughter trailing down the dirt road until silence settled over Willow Creek again. I stood on my porch, lantern swaying above, and exhaled. The farm was mine, still mine. Always mine. But respect? Respect had to be guarded like a crop in a storm. And as I turned to blow out the lanterns, I realized tonight hadn't been the end of a fight, it was the planting of seeds. And some seeds, when watered by pride and resentment, grow into weeds that can choke a family whole. The night settled heavy around me, cicadas buzzing like they were gossiping about everything they'd just witnessed. I walked through the house, snuffing out candles, the air still thick with the scent of buttercream and barbecue. My heels clicked against the wooden floor, echoing in the silence that always comes after company leaves. I paused in the kitchen, where earlier Vanessa had hissed her threats. Her half-empty champagne flute still sat on my counter, lipstick smeared on the rim. I stared at it for a long moment before rinsing it clean. Not in my house, I muttered. Out on the porch, I sank into my rocking chair and let the quiet wrap around me. For the first time that day, I allowed myself to breathe, not as a host, not as a mother delivering lessons, but as a woman who had fought too long to finally claim her ground. Yet even in victory, I knew the battle wasn't over. Respect isn't a one-time bargain, it's a contract renewed daily. Marcus had bent, humbled by love and desperation. But Vanessa? She'd swallowed her pride with gritted teeth. And I knew she wasn't the kind to forget the taste. The stars glimmered above Willow Creek Farm, as if the heavens themselves were keeping watch. I thought of the vows spoken under my willow tree. The applause, the toast, the applause again. Tonight had been my coronation. Yes, but every crown is heavy. And mine carried the weight of a future still uncertain. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders and whispered to the night. Lord, give me patience, and if not patience, then the strength to keep my fences high and my backbone higher. A soft breeze rustled the peach trees, like the land itself answering, you've earned this. Protect it. And as I closed my eyes, I understood, this farm wasn't just soil and timber. It was my sanctuary, my fortress, and my line in the sand. Anyone who dared cross it, family or not, would soon learn just how sharp a grandmother's boundaries could be. Morning came dressed in gold. Sunlight spilled across the pastures, painting every blade of grass with the promise of a new day. I stepped onto the porch with my coffee, inhaling the scent of damp earth and peaches warmed by the rising sun. Willow Creek Farm looked peaceful, as if it hadn't hosted the most scandalous wedding in town less than 12 hours ago. But peace is a fragile thing. By 9 o'clock, the phone began to ring. First it was Irene from down the road, cackling so hard she could barely breathe. Evelyn, half the town's talking about you. You stole the show like it was Broadway. Next came Mrs. Henderson from church. You did what every mother dreams of doing. My herald's already on notice. Even the florist called, laughing. Ma'am, you're a legend. I've had 3 brides ask if your farm is available for their weddings. The attention was flattering, sure, but it was also gasoline on the fire. By noon, whispers turned to headlines. The bakery clerk told me people were calling last night's fiasco the Carter wedding massacre. Someone even made a hashtag out of it. I should have been annoyed, but instead, I laughed until my stomach ached. After decades of being invisible, I had become the story. Still, I couldn't ignore the shadow. Vanessa hadn't called. Marcus texted me once, we'll talk soon. Thank you again, Ma, but her silence screamed louder than any apology. I knew she was licking her wounds. And when pride licks, it bites back harder. As I walked the fence line that evening, mending a loose board, I thought about the vows spoken under my willow tree. About Marcus's apology. About Vanessa's speech that had nearly tipped the crowd against me. Family love was messy, but boundaries were messier. I tightened the last nail with a steady hand and said out loud. To the fields, to the trees, to the sky, this land will never again belong to anyone but me. But as the sun sank and the cicadas rose, I felt it in my bones, Vanessa wasn't done. And when she came back, she wouldn't come with bouquets or apologies. She'd come with a plan. The signs came quicker than I expected. On Tuesday morning, I spotted a sleek white SUV idling at the end of my dirt road. Windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. When I stepped onto the porch with my coffee, the engine revved, tires spitting dust as it sped away. By Thursday, the phone calls started, vendors I'd never hired, asking if I was confirming bookings for Vanessa Carter's anniversary event at Willow Creek Farm. My grip on the receiver tightened until my knuckles went white. "No, sir," I said, voice clipped. "Nothing gets booked here without my signature." Every denial felt like swatting at a mosquito. "You know another's coming." That evening, Marcus called, his voice tired. "Ma, don't worry about Vanessa. She's just processing everything." "Processing?" I snapped. "Sounds to me like she's already plotting. You better remind her this farm has a queen. And she doesn't wear a veil." Marcus sighed the way sons sigh when they're caught between loyalty to their mother and devotion to their wife. "I'll talk to her." But I knew the tone of his voice, hesitant, worn thin. Vanessa had a grip on him tighter than any vow spoken under Reverend Brooks's watch. By Friday, word spread at the farmer's market. A neighbor leaned in close, whispering, "Evelyn, I heard Vanessa's telling people you only pulled that stunt because you want to sell the farm and cash in." I laughed so loud heads turned. Sell Willow Creek? After 40 years scrubbing toilets to buy it? Child, she's dreaming. But deep inside, a spark of anger lit hot. Vanessa wasn't just sulking, she was rewriting the story. Painting me as greedy, selfish, unfit. I looked out across my 80 acres. The willow tree swaying like it knew every secret. I'd fought too long for this land to let a daughter-in-law turn it into her stepping stone. And that's when I decided, if Vanessa wanted war, I'd give her one, but on my battlefield. Under my rules, with every neighbor, cousin, and peach tree as my witness. Saturday dawned heavy with storm clouds. As if the sky itself knew a reckoning was brewing. I was on the porch tightening the hinges on my screen door when I heard tires crunching down the drive. Marcus's truck, and beside him in the passenger seat, like a queen arriving at court, sat Vanessa, chin high, sunglasses on, lips pursed like she was walking into battle. They didn't even bother with small talk. Vanessa stepped out first, heels stabbing my gravel drive like daggers. "Evelyn," she said, "not Mom, not Mrs. Carter, just my name, sharp as glass." "Vanessa," I replied, calm as ever. "What brings you here this fine morning?" She slid her glasses off, eyes blazing. "You humiliated us. In front of 200 people. My family hasn't stopped calling, asking if I married into a circus. Do you have any idea what that did to my reputation?" I leaned against the porch rail, arms crossed. "Funny, I don't recall your reputation paying a dime toward the mortgage on this land. Respect is earned, darling, not catered with roses and champagne." Marcus tried to step between us. "Ma, please, let's keep this civil." But Vanessa wasn't here for civility. She jabbed a manicured finger at me. "If you think you can keep running this farm like it's some fiefdom, you're wrong. Marcus is your son, and by law, what's his is mine. One day, this farm will belong to us." I felt the heat rise in my chest. But I didn't flinch. Slowly, I pulled a folded document from my apron pocket, crisply notarized. Signed, sealed. I had been carrying it for days, waiting for this moment. "This deed says otherwise," I said, unfolding it with steady hands. "This farm is in my name alone, with a stipulation that it will pass to the town's historical trust, not to you. Not even to Marcus, if anyone tries to claim it without my consent." Vanessa's jaw dropped. Marcus paled. I smiled, soft but sharp. "You wanted a war, Vanessa, but wars are won on paper before they're fought in fields." And as the thunder rolled overhead, I saw it in her eyes, this battle was far from finished. Vanessa wouldn't back down, but neither would I. The thunder cracked like a warning shot, rattling the porch windows. Vanessa's lips curled into a smile that wasn't a smile at all, it was a challenge. She stepped closer, heels grinding against the wood planks. "You think a piece of paper will stop me?" she hissed. "Families don't live on ink and signatures, Evelyn, they live on loyalty. And Marcus," she snapped her fingers, as if he were a servant, "knows where his loyalty belongs." Marcus shifted uneasily, caught between two fires. "Vanessa, don't." "No, let her talk," I said, my voice steady as a stone. "It's high time everyone stopped pretending. This farm isn't built on loyalty. It's built on sacrifice, 40 years of it. You weren't there when I scrubbed floors till my knees bled. You weren't there when I slept 4 hours a night, saving every penny for this land. So don't you dare lecture me about loyalty when all you've shown is entitlement." For the first time, Vanessa faltered, her eyes flickering, but pride is a stubborn beast. She lifted her chin. "Entitlement? Fine, call it what you want. But one day, Marcus will inherit this farm. And then it will be mine. You can't live forever." A sharp silence cut through the air, broken only by the low rumble of thunder. I leaned forward on my cane, looking her dead in the eye. "No," I said softly, each word like a nail driven deep. "I can't live forever, but my will can, and in it, I've made sure this farm will never belong to someone who treats it like a trophy. Marcus will have a share if he earns it. You'll get nothing but the memory of a fight you lost." Marcus swallowed hard, his face pale. Vanessa's mouth opened, then shut, the words strangled in her throat. I turned, stepping back toward the screen door. "Storm's coming," I said over my shoulder. "Best you head home before the road floods." Lightning split the sky, illuminating the truth. I had drawn the line, and it was carved deeper than blood. But as I closed the door behind me, I knew Vanessa wasn't leaving in defeat, she was retreating to plot her next move. And sometimes, the quiet after thunder is more dangerous than the storm itself. The storm that night tore across Willow Creek like it had been waiting for Vanessa's visit to unleash its fury. Rain hammered the tin roof. The wind howled through the peach trees, and every flash of lightning painted the farmhouse walls in silver fire. I sat awake in my rocker, sipping black coffee, watching the storm like it was a preview of battles still to come. By morning, branches littered the yard, but my fences stood tall. I took that as a sign. At church on Sunday, the stairs followed me down the aisle, some admiring, some pitying, all curious. After service, Mrs. Green pulled me aside, whispering like the town crier she was. "Evelyn, folks say Vanessa's been talking to a lawyer in Milltown. Word is, she's asking about spousal inheritance rights." I smiled, calm as a pond at dawn. Let her ask. A lawyer can't rewrite 40 years of sweat. But I won't lie, the news gnawed at me. That night, I pulled the safe from under my bed, laying out every document, the deed, the will, the trust papers, the receipts that proved every nail and shingle was mine alone. I traced my name across the ink like a shield. This wasn't just land, this was my life, pressed into paper, undeniable. 2 days later, Marcus showed up alone. He sat on the porch steps like he had when he was 10 years old. Scuffed sneakers replaced by leather shoes but the same nervous fidget in his hands. "Ma," he said, voice low, "she's not gonna quit. Vanessa thinks you'll cave if she pushes hard enough." I studied him, seeing both the boy I raised and the man caught in his wife's storm. "And what do you think, Marcus?" He hesitated, then met my eyes. "I think you're stronger than both of us. But I'm asking you, don't make me choose between my wife and my mother." The wind rustled the willow branches like an old hymn. I set my hand on his shoulder. "Son, I'm not asking you to choose. I'm asking you to remember who raised you, and what she taught you about right and wrong." His eyes welled, and for a heartbeat, I thought maybe, just maybe, he understood. But as Marcus drove away, dust trailing behind his truck, I knew his heart was split in two, and a man torn between mother and wife can become the sharpest weapon in the wrong hands. The following week, whispers turned into a steady drumbeat. At the market, I overheard women clucking by the peach crates. "Vanessa says Evelyn's losing her grip, that she's too old to manage all that land." At the post office, someone muttered, "Shame, after all those years working, the farm might slip right through her fingers." Each word was a needle, meant to prick, but instead they stitched my resolve tighter. I knew exactly whose hand guided those rumors. On Thursday, a certified letter arrived, thick envelope. Lawyer's seal pressed on the flap. I slid it open with my paring knife. Heart steady. Inside, legal language danced on the page, a petition for joint claim of marital property. Filed on Marcus's behalf but dripping with Vanessa's perfume. My laugh startled even me. Sharp, bitter, victorious. She thought paper could undo sweat. That night, I sat at my desk under the glow of a single lamp and wrote my own letter, this one to Henry, the event planner. I offered him an annual lease, priority use of the farm for corporate events. With enough income to ensure taxes, maintenance, and improvements were always covered. By morning, the fax came back signed. One more layer of armor for Willow Creek. But victory never comes without a price. When Marcus showed up that Sunday, his face was lined with exhaustion. He didn't even make it to the porch, just stopped at the bottom of the steps. Hat in hand, like a boy caught stealing peaches. "Ma," he began, voice cracking. "I didn't know she filed that petition. Vanessa went behind my back. But part of me thinks maybe she's right. Maybe this place should be ours one day." The air between us tightened, sharp as a pulled wire. I stepped down until I was level with him, my cane planted firm in the soil. "Marcus," I said, each word deliberate, "this farm will never belong to anyone who thinks it's owed to them. If you want it, you'll have to earn it, like I did. Like anyone should." He swallowed hard, eyes glistening, torn between love and loyalty, pride and shame. And as he turned away, shoulders heavy, I realized the truth. Vanessa wasn't just testing me. She was testing him, and the real war wouldn't be fought in fields or courts, but in my son's heart. The next days stretched long and uneasy, like the air before a tornado. I kept myself busy, mending fences, pruning peach trees, polishing the old farmhouse floors until they shone like honey. But all the while, I felt it, the storm gathering inside my own family. On Wednesday evening, I heard tires on the gravel again. Not Marcus this time, Vanessa. Stepping out of that glossy white SUV like she owned the very dust beneath her heels. She didn't bother knocking. She marched straight to my porch and planted herself in front of me. Hands on hips. "Evelyn," she said, voice sharp as broken glass. "I came to make you an offer." I didn't rise from my rocker. Just sipped my coffee, letting the silence stretch long enough to remind her whose house she was standing in. "Go on, then." Her smile was thin, practiced. "Sell me the farm, outright, name your price. You'll have more money than you ever dreamed of. And you can live anywhere you want, Florida, Arizona, one of those retirement paradises. Meanwhile, Marcus and I will carry on the family legacy here." I laughed, loud, unladylike, startling even the crows from the willow branches. "Family legacy? You mean the legacy you nearly trampled under your wedding heels?" Her smile faltered. "I'm offering you freedom, comfort. Isn't that what you've worked for all your life?" I leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. I didn't scrub floors for 40 years just to sell my soul wrapped in 74 acres. This land isn't a burden, it's my crown. And no queen sells her crown to a thief with lipstick. For the first time, her mask cracked. Fury flashed hot in her eyes. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "Marcus is my husband, and what's his will always be mine. You can't keep us out forever." I stood then, slow and deliberate, cane firm in my hand. "Watch me." The silence stretched, heavy as a gun barrel between us. Then she turned on her heel, stomping back to her SUV, gravel spitting under her tires as she tore away. I lowered myself back into my rocker, heart steady, lips curled in a smile that tasted of steel. She thought she was the storm, but she hadn't yet learned I was the mountain. But even mountains can be tested. And as her taillights vanished down the road, I knew Vanessa wasn't finished. The real showdown was coming, and this time, it wouldn't just be about land. It would be about the soul of my family. That night, the house felt alive with echoes, every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the wind whispering of battles yet to come. I sat at my kitchen table, the deed spread before me, the ink of my name glowing under the lamplight like a brand. 40 years of scrubbing, saving, and sacrifice, bound up in a few thin sheets of paper. My crown, my fortress, my proof. I thought of Marcus, my boy, torn between the woman he loved and the mother who had built his world. And I thought of Vanessa, sharp, ambitious, ruthless. To her, this farm was power. To me, it was life itself. The clock ticked past midnight, and I whispered into the quiet, "Lord, I've fought storms, bosses, hunger, and loneliness, but give me strength now. Because the fiercest fight isn't outside, it's within my own bloodline. The next morning, I walked my fields, cane pressing into the damp earth with each step. The sun rose over the peach trees, gilding them in light. Birds scattered, startled by my presence, as if even they knew something was coming. I touched the willow tree that had shaded the wedding altar, its branches swaying gently, and I felt a certainty settle deep in my bones. This wasn't just a farm. It was a lesson, a legacy, and if I had to carve it into stone, or into the hearts of those who came after me, I would. When I reached the porch again, I sat tall in my rocker, lifted my chin, and let the words rise from my soul like a hymn. Respect isn't given, it's demanded. And love without respect? That's not family, that's chains. The wind carried my words across Willow Creek, into every tree, every fence post, every corner of earth I had claimed. And for the first time in 70 years, I felt not just like a survivor, but like a sovereign. Because this was my story, my fight, my victory, and it wasn't over, it was just beginning. No matter how late in life it seems, it is never too late to demand respect. Love without respect is not love at all, it is control. And teaching others how to treat you may be the hardest battle. But it is also the greatest gift you can leave behind.